into classrooms around the world. And so, especially this week, we're excited because we've been building up to today all week long. Today is World Oceans Day. We are doing over 45 hangouts with researchers, scientists, vessels all around the world, highlighting the importance of the ocean world. And so, thank you to the class for being here to be a part of it with us. Right now, we've got 5 classes from across North America, so I'm going to give them a chance to do a bit of a shout out. So first, we've got Miss Hiltabiddles, grade 5 from Marlton, New Jersey. Hi, guys.
Everybody.
Hi.
And we've got Miss Wowchuck's grade 6s in Thunder Bay, Ontario. Hi. We've got, are they here yet? Miss Gordon's group in Tatler Lake, BC. Hi, guys. You made it back to the gym. Awesome. Okay. We've got Miss Presley's grade 4s in Virginia Beach, Virginia.
Hi, people.
Hi, guys. And last but not least, we've got Mr. Bresden's grade 3s in Sherwood Park, Alberta. Hi, guys. Hi. Taking over the whole library. Okay. Of course, the reason you guys are all here today is for our speaker. We're joined live by Kristin Westdal, a marine biologist in the Arctic. So she has studied killer whales, narwhals, belugas, some of the most iconic and beautiful animals in the world in one of the most beautiful places in the world, Canada's high Arctic. And so without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to her to share her story of what she's done. And so thank you so much for joining us today, Kristin.
Thank you very much. Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for joining me today. My name's Kristin, and I work as a biologist in the Arctic. And I'm going to show you some photos, some videos, some things that I have with me on my desk, and then let you guys ask some questions about what I do and why the Arctic is so important. So here we go. Okay, can you see my desktop?
Yeah, you're good. We're right in Canada's north.
Perfect. Okay, so here we are. You can see all of Canada, Greenland, and the star that you see, that's Winnipeg, and that's where I currently am and live right now. And where I work is in Canada's high Arctic, so that's mostly Nunavut, which is highlighted there in green. So what does it look like? So in the winter, we have lots and lots of snow. It's really cold in the high Arctic. It gets into the -40s, -50s sometimes. And you have to wear special clothing to work in the Arctic. Usually when I'm up there, I'll borrow some of my friends' clothes and wear sealskin boots, polar bear pants, sealskin jackets in order to keep warm. And in the summer, it actually gets quite warm, and there's been a few times where I've been able to wear a t-shirt in the north. I wanted to show you a little video to give you guys an idea of what it actually looks like in the north. And this was made by my organization that I work for called Oceans North, and friends of ours called Build Films. Okay, so that part of the Arctic was in North Baffin Island where it's pretty mountainous, but there's other parts of the Arctic that are quite flat. The photo on the right is from western Hudson Bay where there's no mountains at all, and it's quite flat as you can see. Then we also have parts of the Arctic that actually have a few trees, and that's what you see on the left. That's a subarctic somewhere near Churchill, Manitoba. So what kind of animals live in the Arctic? I'm sure you guys have some ideas, but we find different kinds of seals. There's all different kinds of whales. And I just wanted to show you a few examples of what these animals look like and, more importantly, what they sound like. So this is a few photos of ring seals. They're small little seals. They're actually about 5 feet in length, so that's about as tall as I am. They're very curious animals. I've seen quite a few in the north. And they live in these little snow caves in the spring where they have their pups. And here's an example of what a ring seal sounds like. A bowhead is another animal that lives in the Arctic. Bowhead actually live in the Arctic year-round. They're one of 3 whales that live in the Arctic year-round, actually. Bowheads, belugas, and narwhal all spend winter and summer in the high north. And they're really, really big animals. They're 2 school buses long, if you can imagine how big that is. And they eat tiny, tiny little fish. Here's an example of what a bowhead whale sounds like. A little bit spooky. Bearded seal. This is one of the bigger seals that we find in the north. They weigh about 70 pounds at birth, which is huge when you think about that. Human babies weigh, anywhere from like 5 to 10 pounds. So this is 70 pounds when they're born. And the adults are quite large. They're 7 to 9 feet in length and weigh anywhere in the neighborhood of 600 to 750 pounds. Here's an example of what a bearded seal sounds like. These guys sound really cool. Those guys sound a little bit eerie. And here's the narwhal, one of my favorites. Male narwhal and some females have tusks, which you can see in the photographs. And I have an example here I'm going to show you in a second. They're one of the deepest diving animals in the world. So they've been recorded to be diving more than 1,000 meters below the surface of the water. Here's what narwhals sound like. Beluga is another one of my favorite animals. Belugas are called the Canaries of the sea because they're quite chatty and they're very loud. And from the surface of the water, you can actually hear them underwater. The babies are born a brown or dark gray, bluish color when they're born. And as they get older, they get white, like the animals that you see here. This is probably the way you're most familiar with seeing them. And here's what belugas sound like. There's also another animal that's really, really common in the north. I wonder if you guys can guess what it is. Take a look here. Bugs. There's loads and loads and loads of bugs in the north. So what does it look like underwater? How do these animals communicate with each other? So it's quite dark underwater. As you get further down in the water column from the surface of the water, you actually lose all the light till eventually there is no light down to where narwhal are diving. So these animals use the sounds that you are hearing, these clicks and buzzes and whistles, so that they can communicate with each other, so that they can find their prey and navigate and figure out where they're going. So one of the projects I have going on right now is up in the high Arctic, where I showed you the video from earlier. And we're looking at monitoring sounds of ships and sounds of animals, and looking for any issues that there might be with ships coming by and disturbing the way that these animals are communicating. So these green dots that you see on the screen is where I have hydrophones down. Hydrophones are underwater microphones. So they're able to listen for the animals and listen for ships and see if there's any change in the way that those animals are communicating based on other things happening around them in their environment. Here's one of the hydrophones. You can see what that looks like. It's that big yellow device actually has the hydrophone inside of it. So in the springtime, what we do is we find a seal hole. That's the picture on the right. You can see that big hole. We aren't able to chop through the ice because the ice is so thick. So we go around looking for a seal hole where they come up and breathe and use that to put our instruments down. So we have an anchor that takes the instrument down to the bottom of the ocean, and then some floats above the instrument so that it stays upright in the water column. And we leave that down for the summer season so we can hear what these animals are up to. Another project I have going right now in the north is looking at beluga movements and distribution in Hudson Bay. So it's a little bit hard to tell, but in those two pictures, you can see two different belugas we have in nets. And I'm gonna stop sharing the screen for a second. Can everybody see me? Okay, so what I was doing in that picture was actually attaching a satellite transmitter. This is what the transmitter looks like. So it's actually quite small. It's got the information tag on it so we know what number it is. But it's a little mini computer inside of this device. And this little antenna is what sends the information back to my computer. So we use these little legs to attach the device to the animal's back. It doesn't really hurt the animal. It's kind of like an ear piercing. Their backs are used for breaking ice, so they don't have a lot of nerve endings inside their backs. So we attach this device to the top of the animal. Every time the animal comes to the surface of the water, this little antenna comes up and out of the water and transmits data to us. And that can give us information on where the animals are moving, their current position that day, how much they were diving, where they were spending their time in the water column. And that helps us figure out what parts of the habitat are important for these animals. I'm just going to go back to the presentation, if I can do that. There we go. Okay, so you can see that's the that's me putting on the tracking device onto the animal there. And then we get information like this back, which is really, really important. You can see in the bottom left where that first red dot is, that's where we tagged most of those animals. This is from a few years ago. And then we were able to track them all the way through their fall migration and into their winter habitat, which is over on the right side of your screen. You can just see the word Strait, but in front of that it's Hudson. So that's Hudson Strait, where belugas from western Hudson Bay overwinter. So we use this information to figure out what parts of the habitat are important for these animals, and then we can use that to figure out how do we conserve that part of the animal's habitat so that we can preserve these animals for the future. So why is this also important to be looking after these animals, trying to figure out where they're moving, how they're communicating? It's important for the species itself, but it's also important for the people of the north. So the people of the Arctic rely on marine mammals for subsistence harvest, as well as for cultural reasons. And so it's important to protect these animals for their future as well. Another reason why this information is important is because the Arctic is changing drastically. I'm sure you guys have all heard the word climate change, and the Arctic is changing faster than anywhere on the planet currently. A good example of this is killer whales. We're finding killer whales in the Arctic more than we used to. 100 years ago, there weren't killer whales in the Arctic, or not that we know of. And now we're seeing killer whales every single year in parts of the Arctic, and we're seeing more of them. So tracking animals and understanding movements and distribution is really important to understanding climate change and protecting our habitat and our animals for the future. I had one other thing here that I wanted to show you guys, something that people are usually really interested in. This is the narwhal tusk. So this is from one of my friends in the Arctic. This is just a little piece of the tusk. So the back end here where you can see it's like a bit of a hole. Can you see in there? So that's actually, this is where the veins would have run through. Sorry, the veins and the nerves. This is actually a tooth, and it would have protruded out of the top of the animal's head, and the tusk would have kept going here, but this one is a little tiny one and it's broken off. But it is a tooth, and it actually curves. It's kind of hard to see maybe. You can see a little bit of a twist along here. Yeah. All narwhal tusks spiral counterclockwise. I keep asking people up north if they've ever seen one that doesn't, and nobody has. So that's kind of an interesting fact about the narwhal tusk. Does anybody have any questions? Oh, yeah. So we'll go straight to questions. That was great, Kristin, by the way. Thank you so much for that. The bearded seal is wild. I've never heard anything like that. All right. Let's go to Mrs. Hildebiddle's class. If you guys want to kick us off. Go right ahead. Do you have any other questions?
Not sure.
It's working. You're good.
Oh, us?
Yep.
Oh, do we have? We were glitching. Does anybody have a question that they'd like to come ask Eva? Say hi, I'm Eva.
Hi, I'm Eva.
Hi, Eva.
What's about doing your job?
Say it louder.
What's your favorite part
of doing your job?
Okay, now I can hear. What's my favorite part of doing my job? Oh, everything's gone black.
Oh, we're good.
There we are.
Yeah, what?
Okay, Ava, can you hear me?
I think it's cutting out with that one class. Yeah, so just what is your favorite part of doing your job? We'll stick with that, and we can come back in a minute if that's...
Yeah. My favorite part of my job is definitely being out in the field. So I love being out in the wilderness. I love being out with people and the animals. And occasionally I get to work in these 2 and 3 week field camps. And that's some of my favorite stuff. It's extreme camping. It's very cold. Sometimes there's snow. But camping out on the land and being around the animals and the people is by far my favorite part of my job.
Very cool. Before we go to our second class, I should mention too, we've got 5 groups that are watching live on YouTube. If you guys submit questions in the chat bar on the right, I can pass them along. So just a thought if there's any classes watching there. But for now, we'll go to Miss Wowchuck's class. You guys have a question?
Did you kill the narwhal to get the tusk? And if you did, how does it affect the narwhal if you didn't kill it?
Yeah, well, I didn't kill this narwhal. This was from a friend of mine who is a hunter up north. And so Inuit communities in the north hunt animals and eat them. And so this tusk, this tooth would have come from one of those hunted animals and was a gift to me.
But as a quick follow-up, would you be able to take off a narwhal tusk without killing or hurting the animal, or does it? Never happen?
That would be virtually impossible.
Okay.
They're very difficult to catch live, and the tooth is actually attached to their head, so there's no way you'd be able to get that.
Right. Excellent. All right. Well, we'll go to Miss Gordon's class. Here's a question.
How long can narwhals hold their breath?
Ooh.
Very good question. So like I was saying, these animals dive to extreme depths. So they're diving down to 1,000 meters or more, and they're known to hold their breath around 25, 30 minutes, which is really long. I can't even hold my breath for a minute at this point.
Awesome.
Good question.
All right, let's go to Miss Presley's class.
Deanna's gonna go. Introduce.
Okay, hello, I'm Keanu.
Hi.
What's your question?
Why was the whale's head so big?
Why was the whale's head so big?
Yes.
Well, some animals, like Beluga, for example, communicate by sending sounds out and receiving sounds. And some of that actually happens through the melon, which is the bulbous part of their forehead. So they send out sounds through their head and actually receive them through the jawbone. And so that's why beluga, for example, have quite a large head.
Very cool. You need to keep a radar beacon in there. It needs a lot of space. All right, let's go to Mr. Bresden's class. So guys, you just have to come up and demute your mic, and then you'll be good to go.
What's your favorite kind of whale?
Ooh, favorite kind of whale?
Oh, good question. My favorite kind of whale, I think it's got to be a beluga. And that's because I've spent so much time around belugas, and I find them to be incredibly beautiful animals and incredibly interesting. They're very curious, and so I like spending time around them.
Excellent. All right, so we'll go back to Miss Hilta Biddle's class.
Darwin, come on up. Okay, we're sending somebody up. Darwin. Say hi, my name is Darwin.
Weirdest animal that you've ever seen in the Arctic?
The weirdest animal? Is that?
Yeah.
The weirdest animal. That's it. Well, you know what? Actually, I would say the weirdest animal I've seen in the Arctic would be a musk ox. I've only seen one, and I was surprised at how tiny they were. Really, really small. You see pictures of musk ox, you see cartoons, and I was imagining these huge behemoth animals, and they were actually like 5 feet tall, with long, long hair coming all the way down to their feet, and that was really surprised me because I hadn't seen one before in real life.
I urge everyone to look up what a musk ox looks like if you don't know that they're very cool. But tiny, wow. Okay, let's go to Miss Wowchuk's class.
If you're putting the hydrophones in the seals' breathing holes, then how do they come up to breathe?
Good question. So seals, ring seals actually maintain a whole bunch of breathing holes in an area. So they never just have one hole to come and breathe out of. There's polar bears walking around the ice that will predate or kill seals, and so they have to constantly be moving around, finding different breathing holes, and making sure that they can keep those holes staying open. And they actually use their claws to scrape at the ice and keep those holes open. So if we're just dropping something down a hole, which takes about 30 seconds, we're not disturbing the seal and stopping them from breathing.
Great question, though. All right, we've got a question from a class online. So Mr. Chris's class in Canton, Michigan, have you seen the problem with microplastics or other pollution in the far north?
That's a very good question, and something that I'm actually just starting a big program on right now. So I'm working with OceanWise in Vancouver on developing a microplastics program in the north, training students just like you guys to learn how to sample water and send stuff back to the lab to see if we can actually find microplastics. So at this point, there's very little research on microplastics in the north. We know that there is some. The quantity and the distribution of it is really unknown. But because of currents and the way that water moves up into the north from points further south, I have no doubt that there will be more plastics in the north as time goes on, which is really sad.
It is sad. It's great that you're working on it, though. And I want to get in 2 quick plugs to say that OceanWise is an amazing organization. So for those classes in Canada that know about what they do check them out more. And marine plastics is an issue that's been brought up in almost every one of our hangouts. So do look more into that. National Geographic has a great issue out right now all on that. So, yeah, it's really good to hear, Kristin, that you're doing that. All right, let's go back to Miss Gordon's class. Yeah. You have a question.
Why did you not call them killer whales but not?
Oh, could you repeat that a little closer to the camera, or could Miss Gordon repeat that?
So Jill's wondering, why did you call them killer whales and not orcas?
Good question. So the scientific name for killer whales is Orcnus orca. So people call them orcas from their scientific name, and then their common name that many people around the world call them is killer whale. So you'll often hear those two words interchangeably, orca or killer whale.
Okay. Good question. All right, let's go to Miss Presley's class.
Come up here. Introduce yourself.
So, hello, my name is Landon, and I was just wondering what really made you want to do this job?
Hi, Landon. Well, actually, I'd have to say that when I was really young, I actually wanted to study primates. I was obsessed with monkeys and apes, and all I wanted to do was hang out in trees and watch monkeys all day. That was my main focus. And then I got really into paddling. So I was into canoeing and kayaking, and I started guiding and started a kayaking company taking people on tours to see beluga whales. And that's really where I fell in love with the North, and I fell in love with belugas. And instead of carrying on the path of paddling and being a tour guide, I decided to keep going to school and did my master's in environmental science and working on a PhD right now actually in biology. So that's where my passion started, from just being outdoors, I'd say.
Very cool. Have you ever got a chance to go see monkeys or apes subsequently, even as a tourist?
I have, yes.
Okay, that's good to hear. Let's go to Mr. Bresden's class again. And yeah, just demute your mic and you're good to go. Yep.
My name is Kristin. What animal is hunted the most?
Could you repeat that a little closer to the camera?
What animal is hunted the most in the Arctic?
Great.
That's a tough question to answer. So, well, I would say actually seals are one of the main animals that are hunted and eaten throughout the North. They're very common. There's a lot of them, and it's quite common to see people out seal hunting and eating seals.
You highlighted earlier in the presentation native communities hunting. Is there any difference you find with people coming in to hunt from other places? Is there commercial hunting?
There is no commercial hunting.
Okay.
No, it's only a subsistence harvest. So it's only for consumption within the community, and it's something that's been going on since the beginning of time.
Yeah, excellent. All right, Kristin, do you have time for one more round of questions?
For sure, yeah.
Great. Let's go back to.
Okay, we're going to have Sophia come up. Just say hi, my name is Sophia.
Hi, my name's Sophia. What do you enjoy about your job the most? And do you like your job?
That's tough. So I really love my job. I really do. Like I was saying earlier, I love spending time in the field. So I actually just came back from Labrador yesterday, and that's some of my favorite time is getting to spend time in the communities, but specifically being able to be out on the water. So if I end up in the city behind a computer for too long, I'm not super happy.
Okay.
But you guys should all know that if you want to be a biologist and you want to be a marine biologist, it's a combination of working in the field and trying to figure out what all of that information that you gathered in the field means. And that means sitting behind a computer.
I don't think we've had a single, because we get that question all the time, I don't think we've had a single scientist yet say that their favorite part is being behind the computer. Some people
love to crunch numbers. That's just not me.
We're gonna track one of those down for one of our hangouts in the future, but the field is really cool. Awesome. Let's go to Miss Wowchuck's class. You guys have a...
What is the goal of your company? What is the goal?
So I work for an organization called Oceans North, and it's a marine conservation organization. So it's a not-for-profit, and we work in the Arctic on marine conservation, trying to promote marine conservation and figuring out what parts of the Arctic should be protected and how to protect them.
Excellent. All right, back to Miss Gordon's class.
Did you know that humans aren't the only predators that prey on whales? Polar bears prey on belugas.
That is true, actually. And I'm hoping to set up a camera in the next month so I can document polar bears actually predating on belugas. So polar bears are known to eat belugas when they can, and killer whales are also known to go after belugas, narwhal, and bowhead whales.
Yeah. There's some really cool, I think it's in one of the BBC series, you can see a polar bear take out a beluga. It's incredible.
It is incredible.
Cool. All right, let's go to Miss Presley's class.
Okay, you're up. Hi, my name is Jacob, and my question is, how long is a narwhal's tusk?
Narwhal tusk can be little, like this guy. And I've also seen them get up to a few meters in length. So, you know, as long as the animal. They can be incredibly long and really, really heavy. I was up in the Arctic a few years ago, and I was trying to carry one for a friend, and it was so heavy that I could barely carry it down the beach.
What do they use the tusks for, Kristin?
So that's still a little bit unknown. So most scientists believe that it's a secondary sexual characteristic. So kind of like a peacock tail or a lion's mane, it's a display. Other people believe that they're used for, you know, more complicated things like finding prey, killing prey, but it's mostly the males that have them. So it's a little bit difficult at this point to assume that only males would have something that's required for the population to survive.
Excellent. All right, and then we'll finish off with one more question from Mr. Bresden's class. You guys, you're good to go.
How does it feel to be the animals?
Come on a little closer, sorry.
How does it feel to be with the animals?
Ooh.
What did she say?
How does it feel to be with the animals?
Oh, well, when you're very close to the animals in the water, it feels very special. It's actually quite calming, and it can be a little bit emotional because being that close to something so large is it's really impressive, and it kind of puts you in your place and makes you think about your place in the world and how big everything is around you.
Your whole tone of voice changed. I can tell how much you love animals. Kristin, before we wrap up, is there any last thing you'd like to share with the classes? Anything about your work, about how they can, you know, help with oceans or learn more about what you're doing?
Well, for one, I work for an organization called Oceans North, and so if you're interested in checking out more what we do, you can look at oceansnorth.org, and some of our research is posted on there, and some really interesting stuff that just happened last week should be going live later this week. We've got some cameras focused on the flow edge, which is where the sea ice meets the open water. And you'll be able to see daily images of what that sea ice looks like right now. So that'll be something really cool to follow along with. And on the other front, I would just say that it's important to remember that everything we do down here affects everything that happens in the north. So, you know, think about what you do in everyday life, and just remember that everything's connected. And if you want to protect the Arctic, you need to protect your little area around you.
Excellent. So what we do at the end of every hangout, Kristin, is I'm going to demute the microphone of every class. So Ms. Piltaville, if you could join me, a huge thank you to Kristin for joining us today. So thank you, Kristin.
Thank you.
Awesome. For the classes, thanks so much for joining us for the Oceans Week. If you're joining us for other hangouts later today, great to see you. Kristin, that was marvelous.
Thank you.
Thank you. Look forward to having you back.